recorded, and materials presented today will be shared after the event on our page at www.ifc.org/GMAP. We've kept everyone on mute to minimize the background noise, and I'll be monitoring questions throughout this presentation, so please post them through the chat room where you can find the button on the top right of your screen, and we will address them toward the end of this presentation. At the end of this presentation, I will also cover how you can take part in our pilot and the GMAP tool. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to Atiya. Atiya, over to you.
Thanks, Min. Good morning, everyone from Washington, D.C. My name again is Atiya Karmali. I am an environmental specialist with the International Finance Corporation, and we are delighted to welcome you to this webinar on the global map of environmental and social risks in agrocommodity production, or GMAP. GMAP is an online tool developed in partnership by IFC and WWF, which analyzes environmental and social supply chain data for close to 250 country agrocommodity combinations in emerging markets. GMAP is based on a unique methodology aligned with the supply chain requirements of the IFC performance standards on environmental and social sustainability, which is the risk management framework used by IFC to guide its financing decisions in emerging markets. Using publicly available data, the tool facilitates rapid agrocommodity trade financing and sourcing decisions by assigning a color-coded risk score for about 235 country agrocommodity combinations in order to support agribusiness firms, processors, and traders, as well as banks and financial institutions that finance the agricultural sector to do business in a sustainable way. The methodology, including weighting and scores, as well as data sources, has been peer-reviewed. GMAP helps support agribusiness firms and banks that finance the agricultural sector to do business in a sustainable way and to achieve positive development impacts at the community level through identifying, mapping, and managing supply chain risks related to child and forced labor, conversion of natural and critical habitat, and loss of biodiversity, which can all represent operational challenges in emerging markets. It does this by providing information at two levels. First, using a unique methodology aligned to IFC's performance standards on environmental and social sustainability, GMAP facilitates rapid financing and sourcing decisions by assigning a color-coded risk score to country commodity combinations. Green, signaling lower risk or proceed to purchase or finance, and red, signaling higher risk or finance or purchase conditional on further due diligence or don't finance or don't purchase. We'll talk more about how this methodology works in practice as during the demo. And second, for those interested in deeper analysis and further due diligence, the tool has detailed risk analysis reports and risk management support and guidance for each country commodity combination. So in summary, GMAP can support financial intermediaries to develop and strengthen their existing internal screening procedures for trade finance as part of their overall environmental and social management system, support the agribusiness sector with undertaking a high-level risk assessment of their sourcing and with defining strategies for sustainable sourcing. And finally, it can help expedite financing decisions and targeted risk assessment and management efforts by providing a color-coded risk score and additional information related to specific risks associated with individual country commodity combinations. The GMAP methodology is underpinned by the IFC performance standards. In particular, the methodology is comprised of the supply chain requirements of the performance standards, specifically on labor and working conditions linked to child labor, forced labor, and conditions of production and safety, as well as on biodiversity conservation, which include land use, protected areas, and the impacts on terrestrial and freshwater biodiversity. These supply chain requirements are defined in turn by 10 indicators, which are then scored using publicly available information. I'm now going to turn over to Min to ask her to explain the risk assessment framework and how the methodology works in practice.
Thanks very much, Atiya. All right. Each of the indicators in GMAP is scored individually according to this risk matrix you see on the screen. Score is output on a scale from 0 to 100, green indicating a lower risk, and red indicating a higher risk. A risk score for each indicator is derived from a combination of two factors or two dimensions. The one you see across horizontally on the top is the probability of occurrence. So the likelihood of something to occur. And it is assessed on a scale of A to E. And along the side, vertically, is the severity of impact, which is measured on a scale of 1 to 5. Higher score on the matrix implies a higher probability of occurrence and severity of impact. Thus, the higher the score, the higher the risk. For each of the indicators under the two PSs, we arrive at a score. And the analysis can also help identify and prioritize areas for potential risk management and further due diligence. And each individual indicator score is then aggregated using a weighted average to arrive at an overall score for the analysis for each country commodity combination. These aggregated risk scores can facilitate targeted and improved screening, assessment, and management of ENS risks. At this point, it's important to emphasize that GMAP is not a go or no-go decision-making tool. It's meant to give an indication of the level of risk, and if the decision is made to proceed in areas of high risk or those shown as red in GMAP, it's important to think about further due diligence and risk mitigation steps. And with that, I'm going to turn over to the tool, to the demo of the tool itself. The tool is currently live, and you can go and find the tool by going to gmaptool.org. What you will see is a screen that looks like this, and just to review the home page, it contains a brief intro and overview of the tool. The methodology page, which you see on the top right, also has more details on the methodology that Atiya just covered, and the About page has more information about the tool and the history of the tool itself. Coming back to the home page, you see this icon here, Login. Currently, only 3 analyses are available without a user account or profile. Those who have expressed interest in taking part in the pilot will receive their own user accounts to access the full analyses on the 250 country commodity combinations. So with that, I'm just going to quickly log into the system to show you the system with the user profile. The GMAP tool link on the top takes you to the interface to access all of the country commodity analyses. You can either select the country or the commodity from the top navigation, as you can see on the screen. And when clicked on a country, you can see the commodities for which the analyses are available. In this case, I'm just going to quickly go into Brazil. And you are shown the commodities that have been analyzed for that country and their respective aggregated scores. For each commodity, you will also see the overall risk score that has been calculated. And again, this is the aggregated average of the individual indicators for this commodity. I'm going to go into the example of coffee in Brazil. And at this point, you can see all of the indicators under Brazil and coffee. There's also another way to arrive at this. You can also look at it from the commodity perspective. So in this case, I'm going to select coffee from the drop-down menu. And by doing that, you will now see the map of all the countries that have been analyzed for that commodity, in this case, coffee, highlighted in the color according to the assessments. The reds are considered high risk and green ones considered low risk. Going back to Brazil coffee, once you look at a specific country commodity combination, you can save the report as your favorite for easy access later, and this will put into a list of saved reports. And you can also view the report itself at the link below under the country commodity, or you can go and access it on the top right corner of the web tool. Now, before I jump off of this screen, I want to show you one other element. It is the comparative chart. So let's say I wanted to compare Brazil coffee with coffee producing country in Africa, for example. So let me just go to Cote d'Ivoire, and in this case, I can add it underneath to the comparative chart. And here you can get a quick assessment of comparing all of the 10 indices that have been analyzed for these country and commodity combinations. Also down below, this is where you would see your saved reports when you click on Report Saved on the map interface. All right. So next, I'm going to go into the analysis itself. The analysis is made up of 3 individual sections. You are first presented with the overview page, which tells you which country commodity you are looking at and the overall assessment risk score for that analysis. A couple of high-level ways to visualize this analysis. First is a breakdown of the indicators for PS2 for labor and PS6 for biodiversity. For PS2 in this case, we have the 4 indicators, under PS2, there's 4 indicators showing red, 5 indicators showing red and then 1 for green. In PS6, we have 4 indicators, 3 showing red and 1 in green. And you can also hover over to see which individual indicators have been analyzed. You also see the list of the individual indicators and their respective scores, followed on the page by a series of overview information that is meant to set the stage for what the conditions of productions are for this commodity in this country context. We feel that this information is important for users to have, but not necessarily information that has any bearing on the risk itself. The overview information includes production of volume, average yield, regions of production, export volume and major markets, import volume and major markets, production systems, commodity disruption of eco-services, disruption of commodity resource access, extent of in-country processing, major uses of the commodity, commodity-specific regulatory structure, commodity-driven land acquisition, presence of negative media or advocacy attention, certification status for that country, traceability, and stakeholders. Every bit of information on this overview section is referenced with the sources to show where the information came from for verification purposes. In addition to the overview, on the top of the navigation on the screen, we arrive at the analysis data section. This presents every single indicator organized by IFC's performance standards and shows you the individual score for each indicator. There are also questions that guided the assessment for these indicators, followed by the justification of the description to why this indicator was assessed the way it was and how we arrived at this assessment. And again, similar to the page in the overview, every single analysis is referenced with the source information and data. So here, going through quickly, under labor, PS2, we have the indicators use of harmful child labor, laws related to child labor, use of forced labor, laws related to forced labor, conditions of production, laws related to the protection of workers. And then under PS6, rate of expansion into natural areas, impact on protected areas, presence and impact on high or unique terrestrial biodiversity, and finally, presence and impact on high or unique freshwater biodiversity. The last portion of the analysis is the risk management piece that you see on the top right, which covers if a specific country commodity was assessed at a high risk, how can we manage these risks? This part presents risk management guidance from 3 different viewpoints. As you can see on the screen, we have the viewpoints of the agribusiness, financial institutions, and then for IFC. Within, there are a series of steps with guidance, suggested activities, also sub-steps, and reference information. Each of these are, again, split into guidance of steps. In this case, let's looking at agribusiness under strategy. We talk about prioritizing supply chain, access company leverage, and developing appropriate management strategies. And then 2, the action, implementing the ENS risk management strategy with the activities and resources listed below. And going into the monitoring and evaluation, also the M&E activities as well as the resources. And that, in a nutshell, is a walkthrough of the tool itself. Before I leave this page, one thing that I did want to note is for the analysis for Brazilian coffee, after you go through all of the pages, you see the tab on the top right is where you can generate the full report of the analysis for Brazil coffee into a 16-page PDF. So all of the studies and the analysis for this combination can be generated in a PDF for you. So essentially the static report of what we just covered on the web tool. I'd like to also mention just one more thing, that is the mapping functionality that you see on the top right, where you can primarily look up production areas. There are sections in this which we are currently working through as part of the pilot. So please stay tuned and do explore as part of the pilot in using the tool itself. And with that, I'm going to pass over the baton to my colleague Louis-Philippe, who is going to cover the case study. LP, are you there?
I'm still here, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, do you hear me well, Amin?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, so I just want to give to the participants of this webinar a few examples of IFC have been doing its due diligence, especially for commodity traders related to different commodities and different, country of origin. I think the key point is, as Minda has been saying, the GMAP give us, a risk score level in terms of risk exposure, to child labor, forced labor, as well as occupational health and safety, as well as conversion of natural and critical habitat. But the point of the matter is not only to limit itself to the score and to make a decision, but to say how it can manage the risk as it relates to the GMAP. So I will give you 4 examples. So the first example is soy in Brazil. Just as a backgrounder, IFC haven't invested in soy in Brazil until 2014. The reason why is that most of the soy production in Brazil recently were coming from the sensitive biome, ecologically sensitive biome in Brazil, which was the Amazon biome, as well as the Cerrado and the Chaco. So the point of the matter is that when you use the GMAP, you get the score of 91, which is very high risk. And the key finding of the GMAP was potential negative environmental impact from sensitive biome, which is the one that I mentioned. I just want to underline also what is useful with the GMAP is that you can understand that, the fact that you can disaggregate the score, you can see that the risk of harmful child labor or forced labor or even occupational health and safety is not a consideration in soybean sourcing in Brazil because it's harvested mechanically. So there is no issue as it relates to worker condition or labor conditions. So I just want to underline that with 2 companies that we have invested equity investment back in 2014, we have agreed with both companies on a series of actions that were related to their supply chain. The key point that was related when we had this discussion with both companies was what was the management control that this company had over their third-party supplier. The key point is that if a company cannot demonstrate such management control, it's impossible for the company to enforce any ENS specification to their third party. But in the specific case of these 2 companies, they had about 5 to 10% of their third-party supplier on the sourcing that was pre-financed, meaning a 1-year contractual agreement in order to secure the sourcing. So the first thing that we did with both companies was to establish a sustainable sourcing policy, as you can see in the case study, as well as defining a series of.
LP?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt. You're breaking up a little bit. Would you mind speaking closer to the microphone?
Okay. Is it better?
Can you talk a little bit more?
Okay. Is it better? So I was just.
Yes.
I was just going on the ENS specification for the sourcing in Brazil. So as you can see, there is a number of specifications that we have requested these 2 companies to apply in terms of their sourcing for pre-financed supplier over which they have management control. So these, and after that, obviously, the ENS specification were mainstream into their credit review process. So I just want to underline that these 2 companies have successfully implemented this supply chain related requirement. And I think they're leading, just as of today, they're leading in terms of the trader supply chain on sustainable sourcing in Brazil. So it's just to give you one example of what is possible to ask companies as part of an action and social action plan. Let's go to the next case study. So the other one is Indonesia palm oil. So I just want to underline that IFC since 2009 hasn't done any investment in the palm oil sector. But we have been working with a company that is being supported by IFC through advisory services. So meaning that this company needs to be consistent on the performance standard requirement, but not required specifically to be in compliance. So Indonesia palm oil, as you can see, has a very high risk score. No need to say that there is incidence of harmful child labor, forced labor that is very well documented, and no need to see the biodiversity impact of palm oil expansion, especially in Indonesia, has been very damaging, especially on conversion of natural and critical habitat. So the action plans that we developed with this company is to some extent similar to the same companies that to the company that we have requested on the sourcing in Brazil is to establish a sustainable sourcing policy. So this company have established a supply code of conduct, which is now on its website, so very well documented. And after that, the agreement was that every pre-finance fresh fruit bunches supplier were required to sign the company's supply code of conduct in order to demonstrate their commitment to meet over time the requirement of that company, which was very much in line with PS2 requirements of the performance standard. As it relates to the credit review process, as we have done for the sourcing in Brazil, there were specifically country-based, I should say, Indonesia palm oil requirement that was spelled out in this credit review process that you can see on this presentation. So just to indicate, again, the company has successfully implemented this requirement. I believe it's the company that is leading at the moment the sustainable palm oils, or should I say FFB sourcing in Indonesia. And this company is widely recognized now as a leader in its industry. Going forward on the third one, which was a very challenging one, which is Côte d'Ivoire cocoa. Min, you want to move to the other slide? Yeah, exactly. So just to indicate that until 2012, IFC has not invested in cocoa sector in West Africa because of the significant incidence of child and forced labor in Côte d'Ivoire as well as in Ghana. It's this incidence of child labor is very well documented through multiple documentation, including the International Labor Organization or through third-party standard. So the challenge that we have established with traders in the cocoa sector in both countries, in Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, was for the traders to first of all identify a supplier code of conduct. And if you are interested by supplier code of conduct, I advise you one company that established a supplier code of conduct aligned with IFC performance standard on supply chain is a company that is called Olam, that maybe some of you are very familiar with. So Olam has defined its supplier code of conduct, and after that they were in agreement with multiple companies so far that they indicate that they were going to establish over a 5-year period a sustainability sourcing strategy, meaning what were the actions based on the baseline. So for example, they were sourcing 40% of certified cocoa, how they were going to increase their certified sourcing of cocoa from 40% to a certain percentage during the lifetime of IFC investment. So again, you can see that there's all the activities that we have been requiring these traders as well as processors in the cocoa sector in West Africa. And the last example is a very recent example of an investment that is yet to be approved by our board. IFC is going to invest in a tuna cannery in the Solomon Islands. As you can see, the tuna sourcing in the Solomon Islands, the level of risk is lower than the 3 previous cases that were presented. This being said, there are significant issues as it relates to the risk due to wild capture fisheries and the fishery management overall in the West Pacific. Human rights and labor concern on the longliner sector is very well documented by the U.S. Department of Labor, as well as risk of forced labor and human trafficking on distant water fishing vessels. This again has been very recently documented by a number of research institutions. So this company that IFC is going to engage with have adopted an ethical sourcing policy. So this is a company that has already been publishing this policy. And as I mentioned, on a number of ENS criteria in order to ensure that they can manage this reputational risk. So I will not get into the detail, but what you can see is that this company have recruited an independent NGOs in order to audit their longliner for one of their operations in the Pacific. And I've provided, the website where you can access, such report. What the key point is that this audit was performed for one of their Pacific operations, but not for the one in which IFC is going to invest. So specifically for the one that IFC is going to invest, you can see that we have agreed with that company on an action plan, which spelled out 2 critical action items. One is to screen their longliners before granting fishing licenses, and after that, during the IFC investment, sample of longliners are going to be audited on a permanent basis throughout the investment of IFC. So this gives you, I think, a reality check of the usefulness of the GMAP. The GMAP give us a heads up in terms of the risk associated with the country commodity. And based on that, the ENS team assigned to a direct investment can define in partnership with the clients how we can mitigate this risk.
Great, thank you, LP. So in conclusion, we wanted to emphasize some additional characteristics of the tool. In particular, its uniqueness in terms of addressing supply chain risks that are relevant for emerging markets, as well as its effectiveness, which we have tested through a pilot previously, as well as through the due diligence process used by our specialists, which LP just described over the course of the 4 case studies, that we ourselves use when assessing potential investments. In addition to that, the unique partnership of IFC and WWF in terms of both the methodology developed through the performance standards, in particular the supply chain components of the standards, as well as the use of publicly available data sources in a way that is transparent and clear and easy to understand, we believe also serve to strengthen the tool. I'll now ask Min to provide details about registering, as well as to field any questions we received from our participants that LP, Min, and I will attempt to answer.
Thanks very much, Atia. Turning to some of the questions that came in first, one of the questions we have is, why does GMAP only focus on PS1 and why doesn't GMAP focus on PS1 and PS7? These are many risk implications on agro commodities.
I can take that question, and LP, also, when I finish, please add anything that you think is good for us to emphasize. That in a nutshell, GMAP focuses on the supply chain risk aspects of the standards, which are nested in Performance Standard 2 in terms of its labor components, and Performance Standard 6 in terms of biodiversity. And those are the reasons for the focus on PS2 and PS6, and the reasons we are not including elements from the other performance standards. As LP emphasized, GMAP, when used by IFC, is one piece of a larger due diligence process that IFC uses, and we would recommend to any users of the tool who are, depending on the end use, who are using this to complement their existing due diligence processes, that they ensure that GMAP is part of a more robust framework if there are other aspects, other environmental and social risks or issues that are of relevance to your due diligence process. LP, anything from you on this point in particular?
No, just to indicate, I agree, Atia, that IFC made a decision back in 2012 to limit the supply chain requirement, as you said, to child and harmful child labor, forced labor, occupational health and safety, and biodiversity-related issues. I know that there are some companies that have taken a leadership in terms of looking into their supply chain, in terms of water risk, in terms of climate change footprints. But unfortunately, as it stands as of today, IFC has decided, to limit its scope of supply chain, to this, 3 key elements. This being said, over time, probably, our supply chain requirement will probably extend, over time when we will renew, the performance standard in a few years' time.
Thanks.
All right, and one question that just came in, there's quite a few countries and sectors, example, fresh vegetables and cattle, not covered under the tool. Would you consider including them after the pilot? That's actually one of the questions that we ask as part of the feedback gathering. One of the questions is if the 250 country commodity combination is enough. So we'll take stock on some of the countries and also the commodities that the pilot group poses in the feedback, and we will consider them after the pilot. The timeline to include more commodities in this map, again, that's something that we will take a look at after the pilot. So these are very good questions.
And we encourage users and participants in the pilot to provide that feedback to us, in particular which markets you think are key and are being missed by the existing set of combinations, but also are there emerging risks that the pilot participants believe are important for us to be measuring and recognizing and acknowledging as part of the GMAP tool. So please, please participate in the pilot and please provide us with that feedback in terms of additional country commodity combinations that you believe as participants are necessary.
All right. I think, just fielding the questions, I think those are all the questions we have so far. And again, as you see on the tool, on the screen, we ask you to go to ifc.org/GMAP to sign up for the pilot itself by accepting the user agreement, and we will follow up with your individual login details for the phase of the pilot. If you go to this page, you'll also find a lot of useful information, such as quick reference sheets, the full list of our country commodity combinations, and sample risk management guidance information. All right, so with that, thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being here today to learn more about the GMAP tool. We'll end the webinar, and we look forward to hearing your feedback on the tool. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.